And to screw it up less next time, although we can't possibly screw it up as badly as the city is screwing this up.
And welcome to the This Week in Worcester podcast. I am Tom Marino. I'm editor of This Week in Worcester. This is Mr. John Edward Keogh. He is the editor. He's not the editor. He is the he's a contributor to This Week in Worcester. He's the executive producer at Manager Media, and he is president of Hollywood Film Groups. He has 3,684 other titles that we will not cover right now. How are you, Mr. Keogh?
Now that I'm with you, I'm way better.
Excellent.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday evening, where we talk about City of Worcester things. And there are some things to talk about. John, I'm sure you caught the last city council meeting, right?
I was there.
Oh, that's right, you were. Did you find it interesting? The I'll call it political maneuvering about public open meeting law complaint. Did you think that? Well, first of all, did you see it as political maneuvering? That there's, I took it as it seems to be an effort afoot to just keep this issue alive somehow.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most serious I think I've ever seen them take an open meeting law complaint, at least at a municipal level, ever. So, because we've had a ton of regular people put in complaints in the past about boards and the city council meeting behind closed doors, lots of hallway meetings and stuff like that. And but it seems like the mayor is taking this particular one very, very seriously, and the 6 councilors of the majority are making sure that this is investigated to the fullest.
Right, including by a committee that has no jurisdiction over the open meeting law. It's weird how things out of purview have some suddenly become trendy again.
It sets up a really interesting thing that so the 2 committees, since it's a joint meeting, according to the charter, both chairs would have to call for that joint meeting. They have to agree to it. So if one chair would say doesn't agree to it, then you wouldn't have this meeting. So that would be an interesting situation.
It's I mean, there's so many things to say about this. It's just like the political gamesmanship that's going on. That used to be called last election cycle. That was called divisive. Whenever you disagreed with the majority, or like had anything to do, did anything. But this is somehow not divisive. Something that's within the purview, a very important point, a very, very important word in city council this year, the purview of the attorney general. I'm not sure what we're doing here.
So the thing is that I guess if you want to go by the letter of the law, these kind of email exchanges that lead to a definitive action are not supposed to happen without them being published to the public record. But in other situations, like when I was on the cable committee, one of the things that I had to do as the chairperson was if there was an email exchange, I had to then publish those exchanges on the record, right, of the next available meeting. So if there was a meeting that, we had some exchange in between, the public had to be made aware of those in the minutes that were released before the meeting. So then I would go to Judy Warren, who's the director of the City Cable Commission, and I would say, hey, Judy, we got to take these emails and we got to add them to the agenda, and they would become their own agenda item. And then by becoming an agenda item, they would become published to the public. In the case of the Education Committee, they haven't met. So the letter of the law, the opportunity for them to publish the meeting, which I think is what Councilor Hajiaj has been talking about, is that they really haven't had the chance to respond because they haven't met. And there was a lot of things going on leading to that. But one of the members of that committee is currently on indefinite hiatus, right? So how that's going to be arranged, I don't know if two people makes quorum for that committee. I'm not sure the standard there. Maybe they have another person cover. I don't know. But it seems a little bit just out of nowhere that this is now going to be taken seriously, and it really does seem coordinated because the particular person in public who filed the complaint has had a long-standing public issue with Councilor King, and so it seems to be very personal, this entire situation, and so it just really is weird.
Yeah, well, I mean, that person also loves when the police abuse people, so.
Yes. So, and there's just a lot of weird stuff, but it's so inside baseball kind of Worcester for this to be like taking up our time. But last Tuesday was kind of I don't want to say it was it was weak, because there were important things that were talked about, like obviously unhoused folks in the city, and there was other like issues that were discussed. But it was really kind of a low intensity, the calm before the storm city council meeting. But the most intense moments really seem to come from this exchange, and I think they actually kind of led to a little bit of tit for tat on the next item agenda, afterwards, because I was in the room, and at that point I was the only non city official in the room. I was sitting there by myself, and they really, really, really don't like each other, and it is palpable in the room how much disdain there is. And I actually got in a little bit of trouble because I said out loud, I was like, what a waste of time and money, right? Because it's just a waste of time and money, taxpayer dollars. And I was chided by the mayor to keep quiet. Yeah, it was kind of fun.
The a-hole in me, makes me, if we're gonna take this uber seriously, do you remember a meeting in October, for example, where several councilors, certainly a quorum, retreated out, they called a recess and retreated for, I believe it was about 30 minutes.
Yeah, about half an
hour. To a place we don't know where they were.
The mayor's office.
Right.
They were in the mayor's office.
I wonder who's willing to answer some questions about what was discussed then.
I mean, that's really where it goes to, Tom. I mean, what is the standard here for these open laws? And so, by the way, I mean, all right, you and I have both talked about this in the past. It's not, no one is saying that there can't be any conversations between councilors and people in relation to city business. Obviously, there is going to be a time when there's a non-public conversation. We get that. Mm-hmm. There's some things you can't talk about publicly. Like maybe there's a particular employee that has a sickness, or there's somebody, had a death in the family, or there's a bunch of rules and laws, human resources related, where you can't discuss those things publicly. The issue here is that it looks obvious, right? When it looks obvious that city business that's pertinent, that's happening in the moment, is being conducted behind the scenes, there's this question about, hey, are you really following these rules or not? Not necessarily. Again, the open meetings law is a very broad kind of law that was bulked up, I guess, during COVID, right? They really, really, really started to kind of push it, but they only pushed it because of a bunch of lawsuits, right? Because during COVID, there was decision making that was happening, and people were questioning a lot of that stuff. And so here in our city, maybe the first time ever that there was a real attention paid to the school committee happened during that time, right? Because the school committee for a long time kind of met in secret. And then there was a real push by parents in the city to be able to see the school committee up on Zoom and have access to those meetings during that time. And so it makes sense that there would be some eyes on whether or not you're meeting in a room off on the side. And clearly in that October meeting, I think of the 11 counselors, 8 of them went into that room, if I remember correctly, or not, or 7, something like that, and they were in that room together with the doors closed on both sides. So the hallway door was closed, and then the door that's kind of right near the Esther Howland was closed, and then they came back and if you listen to Councilor Russell, who then proposed that the meeting be adjourned, and we're not going to get any business done here tonight. He kind of indicated that they had just had a conversation about it, right? He's like, we were talking, and there's that like thought. So did they decide to have George Russell put the meeting adjournment item up, motion for adjournment in that other room, and that would be illegal. So that didn't seem to be a problem. But now this particular thing, this email exchange between Councilors King, Tu, and Hajiaj is a big problem, right? According to the intensity with which the majority is handling it.
Yep. It's welcome to campaign season. Open campaigning in city council in session. The biggest problem in this stupid city with the open meeting law is, of course, unlike real cities, we only have 11 councilors. Real cities have 13, and their committees, or at least in Boston, their committees have 5 people. So 2 people can talk to each other, right? Because what you can't do is get together as a quorum, which is a majority of any public body, and discuss things. But you can discuss things amongst not a quorum. So you can have personal conversations with another person about what happens. You can actually get business done. Of course, our committees don't really the economic development does stuff. Traffic and parking does, but parking stuff. Traffic and parking meets every week. But even, games are being played there as well. The chairperson of that committee insists on just scheduling the meetings at 5:00, even though one counselor, because the job as a city councilor is part-time, can't be there at 5:00 because they work till then. And so, watch the attendance at committee meetings coming back full circle, which has been intentionally orchestrated.
Right.
Intentionally orchestrated. So it's it's the games are getting interesting, but what that council doesn't seem to want to do is work. It wants to play games.
They do, and then you're going to see that this is used during campaign season at campaign stops, and then I've talked to a lot of people in the local media. It definitely seems that there's a resistance from incumbents this year as a whole, for different reasons, but as a whole, the majority has resisted scheduling debates and events and forums and things like that, where a lot of the time during this period of time, the polling papers season, a lot of those events start getting scheduled early, right? So for example, the forum for the NAACP and the forum for like the African Business Coalition and LABO, and there's a lot of different forums where these public groups are asking for access to the candidates, and they usually try to get the incumbents to agree to those events in March and April, with the hope that whoever does run will also, because papers aren't turned in until May, right? But the idea is that if all the incumbents that are running agree, then whoever is a candidate will just come to those events. And then those groups, those public groups, will have the opportunity to engage with whoever's running. But apparently people are not answering emails or phone calls this year. And engaging with the staff that we have access to, because we have limited staff, there's been a real reluctance, and we're kind of it's April next week, right? And you're seeing that it doesn't look like a lot of folks want to commit to things. So a lot of press release things, a lot of kind of behind the scenes, and then using these things to say, well, I did this and I did that. I held this up in committee because that's my commitment to my constituents, or I didn't allow this to get voted on, or I pushed this forward, or that kind of stuff is going to be used. But then the public really doesn't get to engage with people And so now you're seeing not only the games being played, Tom, but also a resistance to public accountability, engaging with constituents, right? The past few weeks we get the shot clock up there now, which is very interesting. By the way, I got the first ever beep at City Council, right? David Webb went before me, and he didn't get a beep. I went after him, and I went over. I went 3 seconds over, and I got the first beep. So I was very excited about that. And I'll go down in Worcester history, first ever shot clock beep in the Worcester City Council history. But there was this thing they were talking about, limiting it to 30 minutes, limiting public comment, and now we're seeing articles about that now. Let's restrict public participation. And so you're seeing the response to maybe this criticism that's bubbling up, these games that are playing. You're seeing also a resistance to want to engage with the public, which is very, very interesting. So I get to say things, but I don't have to have anybody question me.
I don't have to answer questions, right? I don't have to be accountable to anybody, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, after this coming, we'll get to that in a second, but after this coming Tuesday, I think that this might be a preparation really for this coming Tuesday, when the city council is guaranteed to. Yeah, when the city council is guaranteed to do nothing of substance. But we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
You mentioned a new op-ed in the Telegram and Gazette by former city clerk David Rushton. Now, he spent 28 years in city government and retired in 1998. So he's been out of government almost as long as he was in government.
Right.
And he's written in the Telegram to tell us that we're too stupid to know what we want our own government to do. Again, another one.
Yeah. So the cool part about this is like David, like that name, just like when I saw the article, I was like, I didn't know he was still alive. And so, it's good to know that he's still alive, because it's been 27 years, right? So, but he was in for 28 years. So, I mean, he's obviously been going along a long time. I find it fascinating, the editorial decisions at the Telegram and Gazette for who gets to make those things. There definitely seems to be two camps at the room at the TNG making decisions, right? So because there's like Rob Bellotta put in a guest column a couple weeks ago, but then you got this guy, and you have the public works guy, and then just recently Clark University's go-to henchwoman came down against the kids unionizing. Oh my god, they like just roll her out to give public statements, and then they put her back. It's crazy. But so she used to do the same thing when I was a student over there. They just rolled her out, and then you don't ever hear from her again. But I find that interesting. But if you read the tone that he takes this tone that, like, Tom, you don't deserve to speak because you're making, in his opinion, not you and me specifically, but just in general, we're making personal attacks now against the counselors. But the thing is that, and I would ask Mr. Rushton to really review what he wrote. Criticizing city councilors for specific policy positions is legitimately what the public participation period was designed to do. It was an opportunity to almost take the tension out of the air and give a person the chance to speak. They speak their piece, and then they can go back. And in the past, before this version of the city council over the past 20 years, in the past, when a concerted coalition would get together and have a bunch of people speak on the same issue, the former versions of the city council would respond to that. It did happen sometimes. Now, I'm not saying it was fair or that all communities were represented in that, because that's not the case. But there were periods of time in the past when multiple people would speak on the same thing, and you would see responses. And I would say there was an example we saw in January with the LGBTQ coalition that got together and put a little bit of pressure on, and then it led to the mayor allowing a vote for something that really has no legal change, just saying that the city supports the law that already exists, right? But that change, there was a resistance to that. And then that coalition got together and they put public pressure on city council for a few weeks straight. And then all of a sudden they changed. The difference that I think that we're seeing, Tom, is that they're now really specifically telling you, unless you have money, right, and a big group behind you, we're just going to ignore you. And so that's really an interesting position. The majority has taken that very public stance now, based on their behavior, right? So now we're talking about a 6-year period where this group has been kind of the majority, and it's been the same group of people for that period of time. That have, and they have a voting record now, which is interesting because they don't really vote on anything, but the things that they do vote on pretty consistently are the same, pretty consistently the same.
Yeah, it's I don't know which one irritated me more. I just, people that used to work in government, the government belongs to the people of the city, and the people of the city are city business. It's that simple.
Yeah, basically that the city, I mean, both of the articles, both the public works guy and Rushton's, Moylan and Rushton both kind of took the position that you're not allowed to talk unless you're part of the, the grown-ups.
Unless you agree with the majority, shut up, because we want this majority forever, because our only policy is corporate welfare and let the police run wild as much as they want.
Right. But the problem with that is, Tom, is, again, and I mean, and maybe there is political will for that coalition to be maintained, but it's just interesting that there's not a single person from the majority has taken the position that maybe this group of people should be paid attention to. So now you would think that in an election cycle like that, there could be somebody else who's not with the majority who could come along and grab that coalition of the unsatisfied, I guess would be the right way to approach it, right? And get them all onto the same page. But it's just that I feel like we've seen this before, Tom, right? So like this is kind of the cycle of Worcester politics over the last 30 or 40 years. And we actually have a more recent cycle with 2015 with the DOJ's last sojourn into the Worcester police stuff, where very much the same kind of majority that existed then and exists now, or at least most of the same members, said the police is on the right path, and that everything was going to be fine, and we didn't need a citizens review board then, 2015, right? Councilor Bergman and Mayor Petty were quoted back then as saying we were headed in the right direction. Even though we just had a chief admit that the chief before him was wrong about racism, apparently back in 2015, he was right. Which, again, when you're asking for them to reconcile statements that they made that we have on the record with statements of current situations today, you get silence. Just as you call it, Tom, and I'm going to give Tom Marino credit for this quote. The culture of silence around the city government continues to exist. They won't even answer it. They won't even acknowledge that they said it, even though you bring them the article. I have actually done that to Councilor Bergman, and he just doesn't acknowledge that he gave that quote in 2015, even though he's on video doing it on multiple television stations and is quoted in both the TNG and in other periodicals. So how do we get them to think different? I don't know that we can, Tom, because it seems like they thought exactly the same way the last time there was a police investigation of a high level, and they ignored it then. And I mean, all we have is to go on is history, right?
Yep. So I just before coming online here, I pushed go on a piece, a column I wrote over the weekend. Its headline is Worcester City Council ready to do nothing on police reform. So on Tuesday, there will be not a special meeting. Let's back up. On December 17th, the city council meeting that was not a riot.
Wasn't a riot.
Wasn't a riot. No,
not
that's only a riot if you have your rights violated and you yell about it. That's a riot.
That's right.
But nonetheless,
the police
on December
was not a riot. They did not.
No.
The police officers very kind that night. Very, very. They took it very seriously. I thought.
Yes, and certainly had lots of empathy for potentially victims of crimes.
That's right.
So it's a really
it wasn't any
good signal
perpetrators
sign.
of those crimes in the room, supporting, those crimes being perpetrated.
Couldn't
That didn't
possibly have been.
That would never happen. I don't think so.
No, me neither. So during that meeting, I was surprised it happened, but Mayor Petty raised a motion that the council would have, which was approved by everyone. The council would have five special meetings on the DOJ report.
That's right.
That in its own right that's its own thing. On the DOJ report is its own thing. We'll get to that in a minute. But it was voted unanimously. Special meetings. Now, special meeting is a special meeting. Is a meeting that happens in addition to scheduled meetings. And then, so now we waited 3 months and some odd days, 98 days, I believe we waited since that order was passed. Everybody thought that what we were waiting for was the city manager for another order from Mayor Petty. The city manager was going to deliver a report. Mayor asked for it within 30 days, 98 days later. And it's not even on the agenda. So the report, the most government thing that's ever existed, didn't even happen. And I talked to multiple city councilors before the agenda came out on Friday. We all thought, myself and they, unanimously thought, I didn't talk to everyone, but I talked to a few. And everyone, seems like everyone thought there was going to be a report on the report. No report on the report. So what we have is a petition from, at the time it was in December, was to the vice president and president of one of the police unions and the president of the other union that wants to unmask everyone involved, essentially. But I said, it said the officers involved. And I don't know why I didn't write this prior, because it's pretty straightforward and simple. In U.S. code, it is 34 U.S. code 12601 and 12602 are the law that creates these pattern and practice investigations. In 12602B, which is about records related to these investigations, the entire section is, quote, data acquired under this section shall be used only for research or statistical purposes and may not contain any information that may reveal the identity of the victim or any law enforcement officer. Illegal!
You blew your own mic out. Yeah. You've been saying this all along, but this investigation was never. So let's look at this real quickly, right? Because you've heard a lot of the stuff from the union heads that the DOJ had a politically motivated investigation and yada 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 yada, all that stuff. But from the very beginning, the Department of Justice investigation in this case is almost never to file criminal charges. It's just to point out bad patterns and bad practices. That's really what the process is for. And for a superseding government law enforcement agency that knows law enforcement to say, hey guys, maybe you shouldn't do these things, right? That's kind of what these investigations are for. And very rarely, in fact, I think that you wrote an article about it last year. I think it's only happened 6 times ever in the 74 investigations. And I think 5 of the 6 were in one investigation, which was Baltimore, where there was actual criminal referrals made of officers or departments to the criminal side of the Department of Justice. By the way, all 6 of those referrals resulted in convictions because they had, the evidence basically cold stone. Of course, and then the great television show The Wire, which talks about the Baltimore Police Department, is kind of like the source material, fictionalized some of the stuff, but there's some real cases in there that actually happened. Officers murdering people.
And let's be clear, Baltimore made Worcester look like Disney World. I mean, it was craziness. I mean, drug trafficking, alleged murders. I don't think anybody ever got convicted of murder, but alleged, just assassination of people. I mean, it was a disaster.
And I don't know that anybody, again, see often the defenders of the status quo will say that people are accusing us of X, right? But that never happened. And they'll always make X some like imaginary version of it, right? So if you go back to the December 17th meeting that was not a riot, all of the department union heads said at the podium that how dare somebody, some anonymous person, call every officer a rapist. Now, I have searched high and low, Tom. I've searched high and low. I've searched on our show, and I've searched on your articles. I've looked at Worcester Sucks, Bill Shaner, and his articles, and his show with Chris Robarge. And I've looked in Manny's show, and I've looked at Mass Live and Telegram and Gazette. I've read every article over and over and over, and I can't find anywhere where anybody reporting about this ever says all police officers are rapists. I can't find it anywhere except for one place. One place. And the only place that you find it is in the response from the outside attorney that was hired by the city manager that says that accusation was made. But the accusation itself was never made by anybody locally. And I mean, I went a deep dive into, like Facebook posts and Instagram posts, and you just don't see it anywhere. So what they're doing now is they're trying to say anybody who's against us is calling us all rapists. Yep. And so therefore you can't listen to them because that's what they're saying. But no one's ever said that. In fact, if you read the report and you read the information, the detailed nature of the case, specifically the rape situation, is that it was one officer who may or may not, as you know, what do you say in the business, allegedly raped a person. That is the center of it, and that why that even ended up on the radar of us, of other reporters, is this specific piece. The person who was the victim filed a complaint with officers who were sent to arrest her and said that she was abused by a different officer. Okay. And the department, Bureau of Professional Standards, decided never to really truly investigate that complaint. Now, for those of you who watch our show and that are active police officers and have been super critical of me in person, super critical of me through your weird text messages that you like to send me, super critical of Tom, let me ask you this. The actual policy for the Bureau of Professional Standards, when there is a sexual complaint alleged, whether it's by a victim or a perpetrator, an officer, anybody in any situation, the standard, the actual policy, and you can actually check out Tom's articles for the last year where he's gone into some detailed things, and you can look at the chief's report at the actual policy before the changes that were recommended by the DOJ. The actual policy was that all witnesses would at least be interviewed before an officer could be cleared. That is the policy that existed until last, as far as we can see, December, when Chief Saucier changed it through his reform process. But that was the old policy. And under the old policy, the Bureau of Professional Standards in this specific case did not follow their own policy. Now, I have spoken with Anthony Petrone, Rick Cipro, and I tried to speak with Mr. Duffy about it, but he refuses to talk to me. I spoke with the media guy, Sean Murtha, and I've spoken with Chief Saucier about this. And in every single case, they say something along the lines of they followed the standard practice at the time.
Yep.
Okay. So their standard practice at the time was not to follow their own policy. Like, I'm not, and if you don't believe me, if you're watching this, you don't believe me, I don't even need you to listen to me or to Tom. You can just go to the Telegram and Gazette, and you can read Brad Petroshen's articles over the past 4 years, where this entire scenario is laid out in detail specifically. And Brad is considered by the police department to be the go-to reporter guy. They all respect him, and he gets all the source information. So he's reported this in detail. The Bureau of Professional Standards didn't follow their own policy on this case. This one specific case has nothing to do with the DOJ report. And the representatives today say that they were following the standard practice at the time. So that means the standard practice at the time was not to follow their own internal policy. So if you were an officer, Tom, let's pretend Officer Tom, Sergeant Tom, and a very high visibility case was presented to you like this, and your own policy was just to interview the witnesses, what would you do logically?
Obviously not interview the witnesses, because why would I do that? Because if I don't do that and I violate the policy, nothing happens anyway, so why would I bother?
Right. So that's the crazy thing. So by the way, for everybody again watching, this case and the public coverage of this specific case, which was a vice officer who was accused by a woman who once was involved with prostitution, which they love to bring that up because they want to take down her credibility, right? That specific case predates the Department of Justice investigation by 3 years. So not the report that Tom and I and everybody's been covering since December, not that. The start of the Department investigation case. It predates that start before that by years. So we're not talking about something that happened yesterday. We're talking about something that happened some time ago. And before the investigation happened, the reporting on it already existed.
Yep.
Okay? There was already reporting on it. So you can't say now, oh, the only reason that this case came up was because of the Department of Justice investigation. No. There's at least 4 distinct columns that I can find, 3 by Brad Petroshan and 1 by Ray Mariano responding to it, and where Ray Mariano basically takes down this woman about this particular case and about the accusations that undercover officers were allowing women to give them hand jobs in the car. That is what was happening when they were investigating these things. It's insane when you really truly think about that. That was the standard, because in the same policy, a female officer who's investigating a John, not me, but a person who's seeking to buy sex. That's not my thing. I'm not into that. But anyways, when that is being investigated, a female officer is never allowed to be touched, right? And the supervisor is usually within like 20 feet of that officer. And she usually has a panic button of some kind, a button or a signal or a code, if they are recording it, that tells them that this person is about to touch her. And then if that happens, they all fly into the room and the guy gets arrested, right? That is the standard operating investigation technique when the officer is a woman. But apparently, if the officer is a man, and this is something that was admitted to people before the DOJ incident, if the officer was a man, the man was allowed to get a hand job and other things. But what we know, what has been admitted to, is that would happen repeatedly, was that they were touching the officers in their genital area, both over the clothes and under the clothes, and that was being used as an investigatory technique. Okay, now in this conversation, Tom, has either of us said that every officer did that?
No. It's funny about that, because it seems like people that are critical of police because they're a public agency and criticizing them is normal behavior in a republic or democracy. Those that criticize are always told that they're talking about the police as a monolith, which I don't say that at all. I actually say I'm pro good cop, and bad cops need to not have jobs, and somehow that's treating them as a monolith.
Yeah. Yeah, and so now City Manager Batista was on Manny's show on Friday, and Manny actually asked him this question about accountability, right? And so the city manager answered in this way. He said, Manny asked the question, if you punch somebody in public, you would be fired. And the city manager said, well,
yeah.
If the city council,
how about chasing a guy into his own church and beating him up in front of his kids for no reason?
Right. So there's the thing that we're talking about. Now the city manager, and he gave a very political answer. He said accountability changes depending on the situation. That's what he said. Okay. Now, for most of us that are watching and listening to this conversation as it's been going on, we recognize and understand what he's saying there. So if you have like a 10-year-old kid, for example, who kills somebody, you view the 10-year-old kid differently than you view a 40-year-old man. right? There's two distinctions there. So accountability for the 10-year-old kid is going to be different in the case of murder from the 40-year-old man. And what's the difference? It's very likely the 40-year-old man is going to jail till he dies. And it's very likely that the 10-year-old boy probably isn't going to go to jail. Well, in the past he would, but that he's going to be dealt with in a different way because he's 10, right? Because we know that he's not the same as a 40-year-old man. We get that. But in the case of public officials and in the case of police officers, we believe, or I believe, and Tom, you can say your version of this, is that there's a standard that an officer should be held to that's different from a regular person on the street. And so, yes, if an officer hooks off on a citizen for no reason and commits a crime, I think that officer should be fired. That's my personal.
Like, for example, like grabbing a kid from behind, whipping him into a dog, and then arresting him for crimes he didn't commit.
Exactly, and lying about it on the report. Yes, that would be something I would say that officer should be fired for. If there's an investigation,
I just want to just frame that the right way. That is trying to put somebody in prison for things they didn't do. Just about at least here in the United States, just about the worst thing a local government could do to a person.
True. And not only that, if you take it to the all politics is local thing, we just had for the last 8 years now straight, we've had to listen to the President Trump and President Biden go back and forth about each other's governments framing them and framing their families for crimes, right? So that's what we've heard about. It's been the only story really that takes up all the room for years and years and years. This person's investigating me, it's not fair. This person's investigating me, it's not fair. Yada, 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 that we're being set up. That's all we've heard. And we've been on both sides, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, it's the worst possible thing of all time to frame someone for a crime they didn't commit, right? It doesn't matter whether you think they committed crimes. That doesn't matter. What matters is that everybody agrees that this is a bad thing to do. In this case, if you go to Tom's article, you can see the video. This officer wrote that this young man did something that clearly and distinctly can be seen on the video he didn't do. And so there's no other conclusion other than that the officer lied. And further, when first confronted with the report, the chief at the time, when first confronted with it, refused to acknowledge the distinction between the report and the video. It was only when the lawsuit got past probable cause, which made it most likely that the city was going to pay, that the chief changed the report in backwards and rewrote it and said, no, this is what happened, and then admitted that there was a policy violation.
Yeah.
and folks, go read Tom's story on thisweekinworcester.com and up on Facebook on This Week in Worcester and check out that story, and you can see the details of it. But it's very clear that we have an officer who is documented lying, and that officer has had no accountability.
Right. Well, no. He moved on to a different team that he's back onto now. And from what I understand, at least from what I've heard.
Okay.
And
he was not allowed to train with his doggy for a couple years, and now he's back with his dog. Right.
From what I understand,
and we're supposed to believe that he wasn't interacting with that dog. That's still a canine officer.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. But it's funny. We always hear the vast majority of Worcester police officers do the right thing. Probably true.
Yeah.
Probably true. I'm into that. I'll sign on to that. But in that statement inherently is that there's a minority. And it's a pretty classic bad apples argument. But I guess we're not supposed to remember that the rest of that statement spoils the whole bunch.
Yes. And not only that, Tom, but the thing is that this bad apples argument has been being made for 40 years, not a day. So what's allowing the bad apples to continue to go bad? What makes an apple go bad?
I mean, at some point, you have to look at the total and complete inaction of the elected representatives of the city.
Sure, and I think
they won't even acknowledge there's a problem.
Right. They won't even acknowledge that there's an issue. And that's a real big thing. And so here's another really important...
The issue to them is that the DOJ wrote a report. That's the issue.
Yes. It's just, and not only that, is that they feel pissed off that the DOJ didn't give them a heads up, because that's a big thing in Worcester, is that if you like have something and you don't give a heads up to someone else, then now you're considered like a bad guy, right? Like, so it's like,
the audacity of this, all this makes me mad. The audacity. Imagine you're being investigated by the police department and you tell them what they're supposed to do. If you don't catch a baton in the face for it, you'll at least get laughed out of the room.
And I would say that I think that I've experienced a little bit of that over the past couple of months, because, all of a sudden I started getting pressure, from different people because of the things that we've said publicly. And as soon as I talked about it on your show, that I was getting threats and I was getting like some push and things that were happening that were a little weird.
Par for the course.
No, but it went away. Right. It like over the last week or so, it's kind of died down. And I find it very interesting, because I think that they were anticipating our coverage of this event leading up to Tuesday. And I think, again, both the police leaders and the city council are hoping, and they're hoping for all of you who are watching and everybody who is going to the city council on Tuesday, that you're going to go, you're going to say what you got to say, and then you're going to leave, and then it's all going to go away. That is what they are hoping 100%.
Absolutely. And let me tell you, look, just about everything in that department will be better with the current chief, right? Because it's really hard to find leadership that was worse than we've had in the last 20 years for that department. And let's not forget, what type of example is it when the last chief was literally chasing a guy through city streets to yell at him because he felt slighted, and then lied to the internal investigator, which was hired from outside. And then the last city manager, not the city manager Augustus, decided to cover it up and let him just continue on harassing that person, which was going to cost the city a bunch of money, because that is now a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So that was the leadership that we had at the top. But they want to name a street after this guy.
Yeah, they do want to name some areas. Although the process for naming streets just changed, so I don't know if it's going to go through as easy.
That's just honorary streets. That's just honorary streets. They want to preserve their right to give Augustus, who's as responsible as anyone for how out of control this police department spiraled at points.
Maybe Chandler Street will be renamed. After Ed Augustus? No, maybe.
Yeah. Bury the Report Drive. That should be the name of the street. Bury the Report Drive.
Wait. Should it be the road to Hudson, because he didn't live in the city for most of the time? Well, I forget what street that is, but whatever the way to Hudson.
That's fine. That's no big deal. It's got Augustus. It's no big deal.
Doesn't even matter, right? Yeah, why live in the city?
It's a perfect example of rules are for other people.
He's going to send me a pointed message on LinkedIn now because of that. So,
oh, good for him.
He watches our show, Tom.
This is send me a message.
Yeah, send. Hey Ed, send Tom a message.
Useless.
No, it's great though. So this is exactly the point. It's like, if you call someone out on their, it's you know what I was thinking. I've been thinking about this a lot, and this is like the classic husband caught cheating but not caught all the way move, right? So it's like, okay, all right, so on the husband's cell phone, there's a couple racy pictures, and maybe there's a couple of deleted text messages, and you find a scrunchie in his car, right? And he comes home one day and he has a little bit of perfume on it, and you, as the wife, you say, oh, hey, where were you? And he's like, how dare you ask me where I was? And he gets mad at you and starts yelling at you for accusing him, and how dare you, and starts bringing up things that he's done for you in the past. The classic gaslighting, husband caught cheating situation. And what happens in almost all of those situations? Almost always, there's pictures or there's video, or they get caught out in public. Right? So the thing is that this entire defense, this entire approach that the majority has taken and that the police department has taken, other than Chief Saucier, to his credit, who has admitted that there were things that have gone wrong. So I give him credit for that. Good for him. But the rest of the entire thing is depending on there never being any information ever that comes that makes it look like they were lying. And the thing is that some of that information is already there. But they're going to say that there's no smoking gun, right? There's no video, there's no pictures, there's no nothing. But Tom, isn't it always the way? Isn't it always the way that there's going to be something? And they have all staked their entire legacy on this, because I'm talking about everyone in the majority, whether it's Mayor Petty or Councilor Toomey, all the way down, all the union heads. If at some point there comes a video of, say, an officer bringing a young girl, around in a cruiser and, going to places that he shouldn't have been going to, or if there is pictures or text messages, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? The same thing that's happened in other prominent cases, and I'm not going to mention it. Yeah, we're not going to get it.
Yeah, they'll treat it like it's, and that, it's obviously the only person. That person will be
one person, right? But the thing is that we know publicly, and it's our responsibility to hold them accountable, Tom, that they have consistently said there's not even one person.
Mm-hmm.
They've said there's not even one person that's ever done this, and no officer shall ever be bad in any way, shape, or form. In all the things, whether it's the overtime situation, whether it's the hiding evidence in cases, whether it's forcing someone to a confession that they didn't confess, whether it's the sexual misconduct, whether it's police force brutality. We're not just talking about one scenario. We're talking about 5, 6, 7, 100 scenarios, and they're saying never, ever, ever has anybody ever done this. This is not true. That means that it better not ever be true, because if it is true, Tom, how are we supposed to believe them about anything else that they have to say publicly?
I think, and I put this in my piece, and people aren't going to like it, and oh well. I think what we have here is, like some people have said, this report is bad for the department. Like, how wrong of a perspective could you have? Yeah. Really? This, I don't expect the union heads to know the law about this. They want to know who the cops are, right? I get their perspective. I don't necessarily agree, but I get their perspective. But how is it still how did this get tabled and left on the agenda for 3 months if they're asking for something that literally DOJ is prohibited by law from doing? How is that possible?
And not only that, you've actually said it in a meeting. This is the crazy thing about it, Tom. You've actually stood in the dock and you mentioned this at the meeting, and then city councilors heard you say it and got up and still said, we need the names. But you just said to them, and then not only that, in the documentation between the DOJ and the city, which we have attached as items to the city council record, right? It's there. We can read it. The DOJ says in there that this is not for criminal complaining. It's for documentation, data collection. Look at the entire thing. They say it in all the correspondence with them, yet they still, and so the city council is what I'm seeing. If you're a constituent, you should look at your city council and say, what are you, stupid? Do you not read the city council record that is published now? Week after week after week with these things attached to it because it's been held.
And with all the recent controversy about how important it is to show up to work, what does it matter if you show up and don't do anything?
And, I was also in the room for that. George Russell got his little applause line. We could all agree to show up for work. And that really struck me as this not knowing the room and not thinking that the other people that might have a different opinion in the room matter. And that's really what it comes down to. It's just a valuing of
show up for work. They had a 2-hour meeting last week. Since we now know that only meetings count for actually working when you're a city councilor, right? That's the only thing that matters. They showed up for 2 hours last week. What's that? So a few $100 an hour on the salary this year?
That's right.
And then whoever had a committee meeting last week, of course, then maybe they can chop it down to $100 an hour.
Not only that,
to do what?
Well, look at even further. If you go look at the 2-hour meeting that they had, there was like 16 votes that they took as so ordered, right? So like the mayor reads it, they've already pre-agreed that they're just going to pass it through to the city manager, to a committee, or anything like that.
Not an open meeting law violation.
Huh?
That's not an open meeting law violation.
No, but I'm just saying, right? No, it's not, right? They've already discussed it in email, right? But because they put it on the record, right? Those little green lines that you see from the city clerk, that is their way of overcoming this exact thing that they're accusing the education committee of. It's that little green text where you see 11 yays and a no as so ordered. So Mayor Petty is saying we've already kind of agreed about this. So on those 2-hour meetings, the city business that's so important, right? And that's so important that we need to change the culture and reduce time and not allow people to speak and all those other things, right? That's what they've said. That's what they've pontificated on. That same exact process they use to not do their job on item after item after item after item. And realistically, and I understand this puts a lot of pressure on a small group of counselors. I've gone there and I've talked about Spectrum and holding the items for Spectrum that are public hearings, not just the installations, but specifically when they gain access to a neighborhood, there is a public hearing required by the city council. They're supposed to open a hearing and they're supposed to have conversation about it, and a representative from Spectrum is supposed to come. And if you want to get an example, just go back 3 weeks and you can see that the National Grid actually had their representatives go to both the operations committee, right? Public Works committee and the city council, and be present for the public hearing related to the issues on the price increases that we've all seen, right? So now that National Grid showed up, and I'm not saying I agree with anything they've done, and that they're not, price greedy, war profiteers, because they are. They really, really are. But they at least showed up. Spectrum doesn't show up. When I've asked other counselors, why don't you hold this item until someone shows up from Spectrum? Even the more progressive counselors say, oh, I don't want to do that. I got to keep a seat at the table, yada, yada, yada. Not everybody, but I'm just saying I've gotten that answer many, many times. And so even then, Mr. Russell, why don't you hold that? Why don't you hold those items? Why don't we discuss that? Why don't we do your job? If you're so worried about the functionality of the city council, last week was a perfect opportunity to really go in and discuss that, and you didn't, right?
Well, I mean, what I would say about that is I don't want to get down that rabbit hole. Finish my thought though. I don't really, I don't expect the union heads to know the law on this stuff and what the statute says. But I do expect city council to, and I'm sure they do. Right. So every time they said that they need the names, well, that's pretty disingenuous, if not an outright lie, because they're leaving out an important fact that's illegal. But it shows that this thing had to be tabled and sit on the agenda, even though it's patently unlawful. It shows that it is status and not merit, and not anything else but status. Your status in the city. If you're in the in the government class of police officers, elected officials, high-ranking city officials, of course, elected officials, key donors and supporters, that gives you better access to your government.
Sure. And that's, again, it's funny because you keep saying it, and we say it directly to city councils, but they won't even acknowledge this, Tom. That's the thing that's really difficult. It's like, okay, here's the paperwork proving the thing. Here's the physical evidence proving the thing. Here's your statement saying the opposite. What do you think about that, Counselor so-and-so? And their answer is just silence. Just silence, because they expect, again, this to just go away. They do not expect the public.
Anything substantive. City council, mind you, this is what city council is going to do on police reform. Absolutely nothing. What you're going to see on Tuesday is they're going to listen to a bunch of angry people. They're going to check out because they're not going to like the way some of the things that were said, the way they were said.
Yes,
They'll completely ignore the content because they'll be offended that somebody dared yell at them when they sat on this issue. Well, I mean, this issue has pre-existed everybody on that council, including the mayor, who's been there 20-some years. And this goes back further than him. But everybody that's there is largely ignored. Councilor King, to some degree, has at least spoke out about this issue and deserves credit for that. Of course, and he gets absolutely hammered for it. God forbid you say that we have some problems at the police department. You can't even say it. Never mind. When you can't say it, that means you can't ever deal with it if you're not even going to acknowledge the problem. The conclusion I kind of come to in my piece is they don't care because it's not going to happen to them.
Yeah, no, they don't believe that this is. Oh, yes, that's true. That is another thing. That's a very, very significant point. They don't ever believe that they're going to get beat up by a police officer. That is true.
They will because of their status.
And that's sad that we even come up with that. That if I was a police officer, I would be ashamed by that. That there are people in our city who believe, children. There was a child who got up that night at the Not a Riot meeting, December 17th, and said how much they fear people in uniform because of an incident where they saw their uncle beat up on a porch in front of them, right? So that's a real case, by the way, a real case where an officer, this is prior to the body camera stuff, these are things that are real things. And that young man has said how afraid he is of officers. I mean, and so this would go to the recruitment efforts of the new chief of police. Why do you think it's so hard to recruit people to be police officers in the city of Worcester?
Oh, just ask Thomas Duffy II. He'll tell you anti-police sentiment.
It's polling sentiment, right? Polling sentiment. No one here has ever said that that's not true, Sarah. So, again, just the have to acknowledge the tip of the cap to the good officers. We've been very clear about that for more than a year.
Yeah, my criticism is not really of the police department at this point. It's about a gutless, just cowardice city council that is never going to do anything to deal with this issue.
Because they believe, Tom, that they are going to be voted in 100%, and they have nothing to worry about.
No. I mean, and look, there's two councilors specifically that campaign on very little else but their support for the police, and they can't afford to be in a spot where police officers are pushing back against that.
Right, that's right.
Because that's their whole campaign.
Yeah,
they have some ideas, really.
But that's the thing about those counselors. Again, the public. I really want there to be change and there to be reform and there to be an opportunity for our city to move forward in a different way than maybe other places in the country. But this really comes down to the coalition of citizens here in the city that are engaging and are trying to get involved and are talking about things like, protest whatever's going on in California, but maybe how about go to one of these campaign meetings where our multiple decade counselors are there saying the same things they've been saying for the same years, and you're not doing anything to stop them. Right. Like, so I have much sympathy for people around the world and for people here in the United States that are struggling with the various political machinations of our societies. Yes, I get it. I'm with you on those things. I just don't see how you can expect to change what's happening in, Alabama if you don't also want to change what's happening on Chandler Street.
Right. And I might have said this.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you that you care about Alabama with your post on Facebook. I don't care anymore. I don't believe anybody anymore with their little they changed their Facebook thing to I stand with whoever. I don't believe you because I don't see you doing what it needs to be done in our city to create lasting change and structural integrity and a belief in each other and an opportunity for the city of Worcester to shine in the way that it can. Because I love Worcester. I love this city, and I've committed my whole life to this city, and I wanna make it succeed so bad. But I don't see a lot of the whiners who complain about what we have to say doing anything to change anything. I just hear them whining, Tom, and that's just really frustrating because, as you said, the city council won't change until we change as a body politic. We have to change to make them change. And how are we going to do that? I don't know. Obviously, turnout has to change, but it's not just about turnout. It's about tone and approach and the things that we care about and what matters and what doesn't matter. And I just don't see, I don't see the change in people. I see a lot of complaining about Elon Musk, and go ahead, complain about that guy all you want, but I don't know how that changes Worcester.
Yeah. And to those who might object, that's it. They just don't care. I can, and I don't know if I said this last week. I wrote it in my piece, so maybe I'm, getting confused. But I can prove it. It's very simple. I can prove it. I can literally prove it. We have a case with Holly Cosenza. Now, the internal investigation said that those officers did everything by the book at that time, because this case was investigated many years ago. He spent 16 years in jail in between.
Wait, before you finish, did you say that they did everything that was standard at the time?
Yes. That sounds
really similar to some of the other stuff we've heard. Continue.
Right. That's what the internal investigation said. Now, a civil jury found that one was the police officer manipulated and fabricated evidence, and another conspired with him to do it. Now, the one that conspired with him was involved in a case that was settled 11 years ago or so, where he was one of two people who interrogated a 16-year-old girl whose infant had just died, and they bullied her, my choice of words, into a confession, and the child wasn't even murdered in the end of the day.
Yeah.
They settled that case for $2.1 million, I think, in 2014. The person that wrote the report on the investigation into the Cosenza case was the other interrogator. He was literally a former partner of one of the people he was writing the report for in the investigation, of his former partner. So you could take that report and throw it away. It's not credible in any way. But nonetheless, let me make my point. So we have one version from the internal investigation, and we have a much different version from a civil jury. John, you tell me, whose job in the Worcester City government is it to find out what the truth is, to look at the report, to get the evidence and all the discovery and whatnot that came from the trial, and see who is right, to find out if we still, because one of those guys retired, so he'll get to cut the pension stealing from good cops for the rest of his life. But the other guy still was a police officer. Who's looking at these two very different versions and finding out what the truth is to discover if we do or do not have a current Worcester police officer who's willing to put you in jail based on made-up evidence? Whose job is to figure that out?
No one's. There is no one currently who has that job.
They don't care because it won't happen to them.
That's true. And then when you ask for oversight over something that like that, so that $2.1 million, right, is directly related to the cost of our local property tax, but in particular for small businesses, right? So we have an economic plan that the city manager has, the 5-year vision and all this other stuff about encouraging entrepreneurial vision and creating opportunities for small and medium-sized businesses to grow local things. But the tax rate is very high compared to other municipalities in the state for businesses. Okay. And we just paid out $2.1 million in our tax dollars, which now we can't have back. We can't reduce the rate. We can't reduce anybody's economic condition. We can't help do this over here or fix a street there or whatever that $2.1 million could go to. But it's not just $2.1 million. It's case after case after case after case after case after case. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. And that's just in this area. just police reform. This has nothing to do with all the bad things that are happening with developers or all the crazy things that are happening with corruption in other places, or the fact that, you have people from the Department of Public Works intentionally, openly not doing their jobs, things like that on purpose to do things in weird ways in the Worcester city government. All of these things are interconnected because of this, A, your words, culture of silence, and B, this culture of attitude or whatever that believes it doesn't affect me, so I don't need to care about it. So if I live on the west side and I'm not worried so much about the plows on Main Street because it doesn't matter to me because the plows always start on my side of the city anyways, which is very true. Right? So it doesn't matter. So my streets are going to be clear. I'm going to be able to get out of my driveway. And weirdly, Tom, they go curb to curb on west side, but they don't go curb to curb in the rest of the city. And what does that mean? If anybody knows plow terminology, curb to curb usually prevents you from running over someone's driveway and refilling it up with snow. But they do that in the inner city because they just don't care about the people in the inner city. But in the west side, they go curb to curb, which pulls the snow away from people's driveways into the middle of the street. And then they plow as a team down those streets, which makes it easier for you to clear your driveway. It's an actual technical approach to plowing snow. When you bring this up, no, it's not. That's not what's happening. When you show a video, no, that's not what's happening. It's every single section of how the city is run, whether it's economic development, whether it's police reform, whether it's the firefighters not getting their contract for what now, I don't know how many years.
170 years now. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's nonsense because they won't toe the line that the city wants. So if you don't participate in the way that the city wants it to be, the secret government, robe wearing, candle carrying, skulls on their heads, little hats that they're wearing, secret government that we have. If you don't toe their line, they will bury you, including, and for those of you who are conservative and you follow Tom and I show police officers, what about our firefighters? The same exact thought process that we're talking about is being applied to police reform. No external oversight is happening in the firefighters' contract. Yeah, they have some beautiful firehouses that they rebuilt because of the fires that killed six men, right? But there's a bunch of other firehouses that are falling apart all over the city, and those firemen have asked for repairs to those things. These are some of the most important first responders, but not just them. How about the EMTs that have to operate out of those buildings? They're falling apart. They're disgusting. You can see them as you go down there. Drive down, go to Grafton Hill, go to Park Avenue, go look at those firehouses, not just the fancy ones, right? So we're not saying it's just happening on the side of the police. We're also saying it happens to our own first responders. It's literally the same thought process, which is we don't care about them because they won't agree with us. That's the whole thought process. And we're just saying this has got to stop. That has got to stop. The fire department deserves to have a building where they can go to the bathroom. They can't go to the bathroom inside a firehouse. It's insanity. They can't, like the kid. Oh, don't even get me started with the schools. Like I'll lose my entire mind. My hair will set on fire, and we'll break the internet. We'll break the internet.
I got another question. I got another question for you. We know, right? Yeah. We know that in the beer garden case with Chris Ayala, he was he went and spoke to a police officer. An interaction that lasted less than 4 seconds before he was grabbed from behind and flung into a dog and then pounced on by a bunch of cops. But worse than that, was then charged with crimes he never committed. Now, you either believe that this is the only time this has ever happened, and which just happened to be on video, it just happened to be a surveillance video there, this is why we know this, because there was surveillance video. You're either delusional and you believe that this is the only time this has ever happened, or we have evidence that not only did an officer file a false police report and file charges for crimes that were never committed, but that the internal investigation basically patted him on the back and said, "Good job, go ahead and do it again." And so we know this, and we know that complaints to Bob's have not been fully investigated. The DOJ has pointed some of that out. If you read any of the reports, any number of reports, you'll find just glaring errors of logic where they're not even trying to get to their conclusion. The conclusion is clearly preordained, and they're not even trying to get to one. Whose job is it, John, in Worcester? Now we know this information. Whose job is it to start reviewing cases to find out if anyone has been incarcerated, or especially is currently incarcerated for things that they should not be incarcerated for? Because justice, right? If we're so all about equity, we must have a sense of justice. Because you can't understand equity without understanding justice. Whose job is it to go look at those cases?
So there is no one in the city of Worcester who reviews those cases. They
don't care because it won't happen to them.
There is an investigator in Joe Early's office whose job is to review cases that have been prosecuted over the years to find out if there's discrepancies. And just like that's a state-created position, and it exists in every district attorney's office in Massachusetts. Worcester County DA is the only office that has never found a discrepancy. Now,
there
people,
you go, folks. There you go, folks.
You don't have to believe me how ridiculous that is. Yes, it's ridiculous. Even Middlesex County, which we've had some of them. Obviously Maura Healey was the attorney general there for a while, or the district attorney, and before her Maura Coakley. And there's been a series of people who have been there. It's a very prominent place that often launches governorships. So you would think that maybe someone who was a governor would not want cases to come out that reflected negatively upon them, but that is not the case. In the case of Maura Healey, there was several cases that she herself prosecuted that it turned out that there was dishonesty from officers and yada 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 yada. And then you can go look those up on your own. But in the case of municipal police forces, even in the towns surrounded, our Worcester area government never looks at those things. And in fact, Tom, if I remember correctly, Joe Early's office recused themselves on almost all of these major cases from investigating the police. If I'm correct, I'm pretty sure that they were not involved in the review of any of these cases that led to civil settlements and civil judgment. So my question, this goes to District Attorney Early's office, right? Now we're getting into where all of a sudden John's going to get shot by a hitman. All right, like I'm going to get taken out bad for bringing this up. But to District Attorney Early, have you had no interest in some of these very prominent and obvious cases where it involved Tom and I? We want to toe the line. Very small group of officers, very bad apples, just a small group, not the whole department, just this group. Why hasn't he ever been involved in that? Right? Why
won't he release records from anything?
Right, but not only that, are there any records to release? Because as we go back to these cases, the Bureau of Professional Standards has, on many cases, in this case that you're talking about, we're just focusing on the beer garden case, right? They cleared the officer. They found no wrongdoing. They found that there was nothing. Yet, go watch the video. I brought it up last week, and I'll bring it up again. Go watch the video. For that young man to make it to that situation, he had to get passed by another officer who was holding the line of the street at least a block back by where Revolution Pie and Pint was. That is where they had a barrier up on the street, and they were not letting people go, because right above the young man, there's another incident with multiple officers taking down a different person, literally at the top of the screen as the young man is being taken down with the dog. That is happening in the same video. Somehow that young man was just magically passed through. No, we know that he engaged with an officer according to the documents of the civil suit that was filed, right? And the police attorney and the city's attorney has refused to this day to allow us to know the name of the officer that the young man spoke to, who he doesn't remember because of a couple reasons. One, he's clearly still distraught about that night. And two, how is he supposed to memorize the officer's badge number and his little silver shield thing when it's dark out and there's a bunch of people having fistfights out in front of his house? No one's going to retain that detail unless they're a genius like Tom. Tom will probably know, but I won't. And so it is what it is, right? And Leanne might remember. I won't remember that kind of stuff because I just don't. I'd be focusing on the fist fights and the fluffy dog trying to bite me. Why is the doggy trying to bite me? I'd be more focused on that situation. Like, why are you mad at me, doggy? It doesn't make any sense. So, but that is another element of this. DA Early didn't find that interesting, that there's an officer that we know let him through. We know that because he couldn't have gotten up the street without it. Every single police officer that was on duty at the time, what happened, Tom? They all were called to the scene. All of them were there. There was hundreds of officers present, and there was off-duty officers brought on and were put on shift by supervisors in that call. That call was what I forget the term for it. It's only been like
yeah, I forget what they call it technically, but I mean, everybody on duty report to the beer garden was the call. So about that, I would say, yeah, right. About that, I would just say we would be quite fortunate to have a DA as amazing as that was DA Ryan in Middlesex County.
Oh, DA. So listen, I cannot say more about DA Ryan and the changes that have been made in that Middlesex County, one of the dirtiest, darkest, dankest, most corrupt organizations ever. And yes, Maura Healey came out of that. I don't care what anybody says, but that is the fact. DA Ryan has done a literal master class of reform in our state, literally a county over, where you can go and look and see a model for how to begin to clear and engage with the community, just admitting things are wrong. Just start with, hey, Officer B lied. Whoever it is, right? Just start with that. DA Ryan has done a great job. I agree with you about that. Obviously, that's not Worcester, so we don't talk about it a lot. But it's not like these things are not possible, Tom. They are possible. They are literally in our own state.
Yep.
They are possible.
Yep. I'll just very cryptically point out that well, the Middlesex County District Attorney's Office is willing to prosecute sex offenders who don't register. And a different offense by the same person, the same complainant can't even get a call back from the DA office in Worcester. So that's a good juxtaposition.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff, Tom. These standard, and again, so this is a real great point without going into particular cases, but if we have an office that represents the same mechanism in government doing one thing, and then we have another similar office doing a different thing, isn't it the public's right to ask why? Why is there a difference between the two? Right? And in this case, we're not talking about a cop, right? We're not talking about we're talking about a citizen, a regular person who was accused of a crime, who apparently documented that they committed the crime, and in one county they're being charged, and in another county, same situation, not. Why? And there's no answer in Worcester County. There's no answer. We have silence on these topics.
Freddie Nathan in the chat.
Freddie Nathan for mayor.
He said no. Stop harassing him.
I'm going to harass him until he's old, till I can beat him to the podium.
and I think we could just end on this topic. Let's get something else, but I think just end on no government organization anywhere in the history of the world. It's never ever happened where one has policed itself effectively. It's not a thing that happens.
Always
for obvious reasons, for obvious conflict of interest reasons. And I've said on the floor of the council, I have said, and I've talked to some councilors privately, and when I say it on the floor of the council, I get looked at like I have 6 heads of their eye roll. And when I talk to those privately, I'm told it's not going to happen. And there's actually independent determination of the facts in police misconduct case. Get someone who doesn't work there and hasn't worked there, like an inspector general type, and it doesn't have to be all about the police. It doesn't have to be all about the police. It could be about the role of an inspector general traditionally, which it would include determining the facts in police cases. You can let the management of those people, wherever that happens, to make the discipline decision. But just have an independent determination of the facts.
Yeah.
And I'm told privately, it's just not going to happen. And
Yes,
when I ask why, there's no answer.
There is no answer. But here's a question for them, Tom. If they don't believe in an independent oversight, then why do they need outside counsel to give statements about it? Why'd they have to hire an independent attorney to give an answer to the press and to talk about it in court and to negotiate with the Department of Justice? If they don't need outside understanding and outside thought, and if you go back to the city manager's statement, I trust him to do his job. From his advice was that we would let him release this statement, right? That's what the city manager said, right? And Mayor Petty defended that statement as well, and the chair of the Public Safety Committee defended the outside counsel statement, right? And it turns out, I think you did a report, Tom. We paid him like $200,000 or some nonsensical amount of money.
I think it was at 280 when I did this report. That's the report came out.
So it is
he's
valuable.
He's the key player in all the in the discussions with the DOJ. So I'm sure that is ballooning.
Right. So, and by the way, which is still going on for all of you who think that this that has stopped. It is literally one of the very few operating things. It has not been stopped. It has not been paused. In fact, when Pam Bondi, current Attorney General of the United States, was recently asked about the ongoing cases that were not paused, and she did not answer. She said she would not comment on ongoing investigations. And your lovely Worcester Police Department is in that group, right? So that's a fact. That case is being currently operated by the Trump Department of Justice. Okay, so this guy that Kelly that gave the statement is an outside attorney. And if there's no need for outside people, why is he getting paid $300,000 of our tax dollars, at least, right? 280 now, and then more, to negotiate with the Department of Justice if there's no need for outside names? Why is he involved? Why couldn't Mike handle that, Tom?
I want to say something about that statement he made, though. This is whatever. He's a right-leaning guy. Whatever you think about that, that's not really the point. But just for the fact is, he appears to be a right-leaning guy. He's lobbied for jobs in Republican administrations. Okay,
yeah.
Nonetheless, he's an accomplished attorney. He was, I think he was in. I think, if I remember correctly, it's been a minute since I looked at it, but I believe he was in the homicide division of the DA's office in Essex for 100 years. Not the DA's office. I'm sorry. What am I looking for? Federal prosecutor's office. And no, I forget. He's done some stuff as a lawyer. I obviously forget. So he's a qualified attorney, is the point. And then he's gone to the private side since. Two things I cannot believe wouldn't be true. I would have a hard time believing these two things are true. One, he knows exactly what the law says. It's 200 words, the law, in the original law, the 94 law. It's very short. 212 words or something like that. I don't believe he doesn't know what the law says. I'm sure he does. And I absolutely don't believe that he didn't advise his client what the law is.
Of course he did. That's his job. He's getting paid a big bunch to do that, right?
And yet, city officials, apparently the city manager, with the blessing of the mayor, so it's through their own words, approved that statement, knowing it was
right. They knew that it was not true, and they'd still let it out, and then they have refused to acknowledge the truthfulness of that statement. They've refused to acknowledge the law. When you ask the city manager, he will prevaricate and he'll push off to the attorney. Well, we're letting this attorney handle that. Mayor Petty now does the same thing. And so but when you ask them about the law, this is what the law says. The law says this was never done. So that means it's a messaging approach. They have a coordinated, determined internal decision that they made to message to the public about this case. And they think that the correct approach that's going to win them the most possible support is this. And so now think about that for a minute. Think about how negative a response we have all seen, not just at this level, but nationally, for this case, for the situation with this report. And they think this is the best approach. No one could think of another approach, Tom? Not a single.
In an election year, John? In an election year.
In an election year.
That's what we're dealing with.
By the way, what's that old adage about the cost of acquisition when it comes to winning over a voter? If you win a voter over, you've helped them fill a pothole, or you've made sure that the mail gets to his mailbox. But if you've lost a voter, it's because you said something in the wrong place at the wrong time and someone told them about it. That's literally the idea that this is taking place. So there's going to be a version of this story that's going to be manipulated through the press or manipulated through people. People are going to hear things about it. And Mayor Petty himself got up on the thing and said about officers who were being confronted when they pulled over somebody and being called rapists. So we know that this has made its way to the general public. We know that the general public is aware of this report, and the city's position is to just deny it. Like, deny it, pretend it doesn't exist. That was their approach. Their study, hundreds of $1,000 lawyer who handles, press and bad situations. Their response was just say it didn't happen.
It's unbelievable. And I think the more, like, I think maybe the most important point about all this is, like, this blanket, we must protect the department.
Yeah.
No, they're not. But that's not what they're doing. It's not what they're doing.
Social media, back the blue.
What they're doing, who they're protecting is bad cops. And who that harms is good cops.
Yeah, it does. And good cops are afraid. And that's the thing. We've talked about this more than one time now. Good cops are afraid to engage on this subject for fear of repercussion from union leadership. That is not a opinion. I'm reporting that. I've heard this from more than 100 officers. Literally. Tom's heard the same thing from his sources. This is a pervasive fear. So just think about this for a second, ladies and gentlemen, the people that watch. Let me present this to you as clear as I can. Whether you're on the left or the right, it doesn't matter. The fact is that our heroes, that we want to be our heroes, right? The police officers that serve us, that we believe in them so much that we let them carry guns and we let them run into dangerous situations. Those folks are afraid of their leadership. So afraid to make a statement, to just give their opinion, right? You go to any bar in Worcester right now. Just go to Breen's, go to any Irish bar, right? Letram's, go to Electric Haze where they had the 90s party last night, right? And just listen for opinions and you'll get them. But you cannot, as a police officer, as a hero, say your opinion in this city without fear of reprisal. That is a fact. That should be. And so any of you who watch in the chat, and sometimes I see you pop up because of my account. I can see the name pop up, who's watching with me, who's looking at it. If you're watching right now and you're an officer and you're not allowed to talk, just think about how that is. We expect you to protect us. We expect you to protect us, and you're not allowed to tell the truth in your own city. It's pretty bad.
Sounds more like Omerta than a job.
It sounds like a gang, my friend. It does sound very much like a gang.
Oh, I was more thinking. I was thinking higher level than that. I was thinking the pinprick club.
Take it to another level.
Yeah, that's where Omerta comes from.
So, but there is hope, Tom. And I know we talk about a lot of things. There is some hope, right? And there's some hope that maybe with a concerted coalition of people that you come on Tuesday night. If you're watching here and you live in the city of Worcester and this is a concern to you, it doesn't matter if you agree with what we're saying. What matters is that you go to City Hall and you express yourself as best you can. Be emotional. Don't be violent. Do your best to express your thoughts and your feelings about this and make them think that it's important to you and make them believe that it is. Because I agree with Tom. I don't think they're going to do anything about it. But maybe, just maybe, with the power of persuasion, someone can get up on that mic and in their 2 minutes before the shot clock goes off, they can say something that will talk a one counselor, just one counselor, into thinking differently. And no, nothing's going to happen that night, because all they're going to do is get up and tell the police chief how awesome he is and how well he's done on reforming the thing. No visible reforms, paperwork reforms, but whatever. He's doing the thing that he's supposed to be doing.
Like, better policy is good, but you haven't addressed how it's going to be enforced.
Sure. And listen, I'll give him credit. And me and Manny have talked to him about this, and he's going to come on Manny's show at some point. He's going to talk to me and Tom about some articles. He's already opened up access to the media for sure. I see it. And there's a second reform, and the second reform that we've seen is there's a ton more foot patrols. I have not seen someone walk up King Street in a blue uniform for anything other than a bad situation in years. And I have seen that happen since he's become the chief of police over the last 18 months. So I give him credit for that. They are attempting community engagement. And I'll even go one more, Tom, a third one. They Captain Early, who is known in the city, he's the new union president, right? But he's known in the police department as the calm guy. They sent him. They've been sending him and his crew to the city council meetings that they thought would get emotional. And so he's not a guy who reacts in a difficult situation, and he normally engages with people. And he's been in some tough spots a couple of those nights that weren't a riot, when he was engaging with people. And so I'll give the chief credit. That's a thoughtful approach. They send a guy that the community likes. They send people out onto the street, and he has opened the door to more transparency. Those have all happened. So I give him credit for that. But the rest of the stuff, how do we know? How do we see it? How do we see it happen, Tom, without seeing an officer who already we know committed a crime with this false police report being held accountable? How do we know that it's happening? Do we just take their word for it? It's hard to. It's really hard to.
The other, I think, important point here is, and look, nobody in a position of power wants to give up any of that power. So the chief is going to disagree. The chief himself will disagree with this, but this is how I see it. It's easier for the city council to do nothing and leave him in the lurch than actually take action and protect him. Sure. This is what I mean. They're going to leave him. You're going to put him in the same predicament as worse people that have preceded him were in, which is it's going to be this constant choice between enforcement, accountability, and protecting his guys. And he's got to look like he's going to protect his guys, because you can't have mutiny on the ship. We saw I forget what year it was now. 21 people called in one day. It was the day after they disciplined somebody for punching a guy on a gurney. And they didn't even find him responsible for unreasonable force. It was that he didn't report the use of force, that they disciplined him. And the next day, 21 people call out. It was obviously coordinated. What did the city do? Absolutely nothing. Just took him on the shit and moved on. And we've seen worse happen in other places. And they're going to leave him in that position where he's going to be caught in the middle. Where if there's an independent determination of the facts, you take him out of the middle. But they won't do that, because it is, and it's not like he is going to personally oversee the gathering of evidence. Yeah, he's going to look at the reports, but so they write the reports better, right?
That's right.
If you're an investigator trying to get to a point where you can stop investigating, or trying to get to a point where you can find somebody not responsible, you write the report better. The past they didn't. It just seems like they didn't even care what the report said, because the chief was going to sign on for it. The past chief. So what they could do is have a spine and protect him from this obvious contradiction in that position. But they're not going to do that, because rank and file unions, whatever, don't want that. But they could easily sell this. All they had to do is not make it only about the police department, and I bet you there wouldn't be a ton of resistance. If you're picking on them, of course, unions are going to push back. But if you're putting this in as a new system that doesn't only apply to the police department, they could probably get this done. But that's risky in election year, and it's about at the end, it's about them.
Right. And I mean, just think about this. So, I know that people who watch our show, they often respond to me and say, like, you guys talk about things like these, like it's like a deep conspiracy and approach and all these.
It's very obvious.
So, for example, the great example is they just had the promotions for the high-ranking officers, right? The lieutenants, the officers, lieutenants, captains, and deputy chiefs. 13 officers, right? That was originally scheduled for last November. Okay, it was bumped. That's a fact. It was bumped. So now we get this immediately following the chief of police's ascension to being the chief of police, and right before this report, we get these new officers that are in place. And it just so happens that we have the first deputy chief who's an African American, Deputy Chief Davenport, and we have the first ever captain who's Latino, Miguel Lopez, right? By the way, 2 officers who have been celebrated a bunch of times throughout the city's history, and officers, former Chief Sergeant used to, on many occasions, bring Deputy Chief Davenport and Captain Lopez to a lot of events. There was a lot of times where they were popping those 2 guys up. That's what we're saying, guys. They literally are doing to our local communities the token thing to try to distract you from the overall thing. And now when I say that, they'll be like, oh, John, you're like reading too far into it. Okay, it's 2025. It's 2025. And we're just saying the first ever deputy chief who's African American in Worcester, Massachusetts.
And he had to sue to get it to become a captain, for God's sake.
Well, no, Tom, don't bring that secret up, Tom. Come on now, we got to celebrate him now. We got to celebrate. You got to let Mayor Petty.
And that's not to say that either one aren't worthy of the job. That's not what we're saying at all.
No, I mean,
I think when look, if you're analyzing politics, you have to analyze optics. What are they trying? What's the story they're trying to tell? And this is pretty obvious.
And by the way, it's not like, I mean, I would never hold it against the Deputy Chief Davenport to say, to like force him to talk about the lawsuit that he had to sue to become a captain. But the fact of the matter, he is, and let's go to that civil service question. He had a higher score than the person who beat him. That was the crux of the case. Remember, they said, well, hey, listen, civil service, we only promote the people with the highest scores. The test is the test, and everybody's the same. In the case of Deputy Chief Davenport, he had a higher score than all of the other white officers who were promoted to captain, and he didn't get the job. So we literally have it, and he won the lawsuit because he eventually got his promotion. We all know that. Okay, so that's the point, is that if you point that out, if I bring that up, you're like, oh, John, you're bringing the dirty past up. And we've moved past that, because look, now he's a deputy chief.
Well, look at the way they treat this. Look at the way they treat this. The DOJ only looked at, they keep saying they only looked at 2018 to 2022. You've unwound, at least 20 years of culture rot in 2, is what you're saying. It's just stupid.
No, Tom. Listen, from 2018 to 2022, those were the really bad years. Everything else, the police.
Perfect.
For 2018 before, the police department never did anything wrong. And for 2022 since, it's been perfect. There's never been anything wrong. It was just those 4 years. And we're working hard to reform those things, Tom. We really got some good policy changes that are going in place.
and
so mad at me on Tuesday. He's going to see me and ask me these questions. Like, hey, you're nice to me at my me becoming the chief. And then just 1 week later, you're on the thing railing at me.
Well, and look, and I think that's the thing is like, I haven't met Captain Early, but I mean, I hear good things. I've heard good things about now Deputy Chief Davenport. Obviously, I'm supportive of the chief. So when we're talking about problems, we're not talking about them, because the politicians. I mean, Augustus did this in 2014. I've mentioned this many times. I went back and watched all the video and. But there was a protest in Worcester that day, and there was actually a lot of cooperation between protest organizers and police. It actually turned out to be kind of a good day. And then a bunch of people went to City Hall, and some, people yell and scream and get emotional. And that, of course, makes you just disqualify everything they say because people had, God forbid, they get emotional. But a lot of people didn't, right? They stated their case plainly, politely, but firmly, saying, "Look, you got some problems here." A lot of people saying some of the things we say about, look, I know cops, they're great. Yeah. But you have some problems. And of course, it was some really ignored, some were scoffed at, ridiculed. Mostly everybody was just ignored. But as soon as public participation was over, the city manager at the time, Augustus, wanted to speak. And the first thing he said was, I was just at a ceremony today, giving a police officer an award because he did such and such and saved a life. We're not talking about him. We're not the ones that treat them like a monolith. These people are.
Yeah, and that's that. There's always the what about thing. It's like, well, one person does this, then what about the person who did the good? No one's saying that at all. And then Tom Duffy in some of his public statements has said, well, there's the reason why people feel this way is just because the public perception has changed. So the question is, why has the public perception changed? Is it a grand conspiracy to defame the folks that are supposed to protect us? Is that what it is? Is it possible at all that there were some incidents that happened where maybe some people did some things wrong, and then this exact attitude was the response even then? So even before there's been this, this kind of, small period of time where our officers are looked at as in negative light. Not everybody, but a group of them. That has taken place, but there was no reason for people to change their minds. There's no reason for people to feel this way. Because I remember 9/11, Tom. I remember, this is all in our time, I remember that the day after. I remember going into Boston and watching the streets lined with people and the USA chants and the first responders being heroes and the books and the movies and the all those things. I remember that in our country. It was a unanimous response to people caring about people so much that they risked their lives. I don't think that there was anybody. Here in New England, we had the brothers of at the time Patriots captain Joe Andruzzi, right? They ran into and risked their lives. Like, that was a real thing. We had officers and fire men leaving from Worcester to go to New York, right? So those are real heroes. No one's denying that. No one's saying that the people that died in the fire aren't heroes. No one's saying that the Officer Familiar isn't a hero when he gave his life to try to save a child. No one's saying those things. But the response to us questioning an officer who wrote a false report is to say that we are saying those things, and that is just complete utter nonsense, Tom. And it used to be like a fear to like push back, but now it's no. You're just trying to pull a stunt and distract us from what is the real important thing, which is we're asking for the police department that we deserve, which is one that protects us and serves us, not one that lords over us and tells us that we're wrong. That is not the right approach. In the community, to answer Manager Batista on Manny's show, he said maybe that is the accountability that the community is asking for them to be fired if they commit a crime. And the answer, Mr. Manager, is yes. We are asking for accountability, that when officers commit crimes, they are no longer officers, because we want no bad apples. That's what we want. We don't want there to be a bad apple. I don't want an innocent person to go to jail because they didn't, because someone faked evidence on them. I don't want officers selling drugs out of the back of their cars. I don't want officers pulling people out of cars in the middle of the day in traffic and throwing them into the street, allowing their car to crash into a tree, and then saying that the guy crashed into the tree. I don't want that from our officers, and you know who you are. You are doing those things. We want those things to stop. And I'm not afraid, and I don't think any of us are going to stop pushing. So don't think Tuesday's the last you're going to hear of this story, because it's not.
Yeah. And I just want to go back to real quick, and then we'll wrap it. Look, somebody who can't control themselves at a youth sports game cannot be a police officer anywhere on earth. It's that simple. At like 14-year-old playing soccer, I couldn't tell. I don't know how old the kids were exactly, but I mean, young kids, youth playing soccer, and you can't control yourself.
But do you see this? Do you see this?
Don't.
Clarification. See, this is what I'm talking about right here. This is absolute nonsense right there. Jose Rivera in the chat saying good clarification on no. There was no clarification. These have always been the stances, always to the thing. Like I told you to your face the other day, These have always been the stances. We are against bad cops. You have gone online and said things that are not true, and I don't really care anymore. I'll tell you to your face like I did the other day. The things that we are saying are true, and it's about time you start believing it, dude. Don't say that in the chat like you're like pontificating, good clarification, John. No, I've been saying this from the beginning, dude, from the beginning on every single platform, that we want officers who are good to stay and officers who are bad to go. Now, why don't you say that? Why don't you say that in public? Because he won't say that. He won't ever come out against an officer who committed a crime. He won't do that. Sorry. That made me hot. Listen, but if you're gonna run for office publicly and then do stuff like that, I'm gonna call you out every single time. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are. Don't do bullshit like that. That's not okay. That's not okay. Don't come on this show and do that.
Okay then.
Good clarification. Look, now I'm spitting, mumbling at myself. I'm all hot.
I just wanted to go back to the thing we talked about last week real quick about hours worked, right?
Yeah.
First of all, the interesting thing is I found in that is, I forget which one of the union leaders said that this has nothing to do with human rights, because the Human Rights Commission.
His two cousins who are two of the complainings. They're two people who are the last name is Rodriguez, have made official complaints against Thomas Duffy for beating them up in public. Those are his two cousins. They claim to be his cousins. That's their statements that they made in their own official complaints to the Worcester Police Department. Which, Jose, you can go onto the police department's website and you can look up the reports yourself. Your name is in two of those reports, so go do it on your own. I'm not doing the work for you. I've already told, and I also told you that in the city council chamber. I sat behind you and I told you that in your ear. That's where it is. So if you don't want to come on the chat and say it, go right on the Worcester Police Department website, look up the last name Rodriguez, search police reports, and you will see two complaints by people that claim to be your cousins that said Thomas Duffy, head of the patrolmen's union, beat them up in public, and you haven't done anything about it. How about that? I'll say it out loud. And everybody who's watching, go ahead and start looking. Go on the Worcester Police Department's website and start searching for that name, and you will find what I'm saying. There you go. There's your evidence that you're looking for, which I've already told you to your face. To your face, I told you that.
I want to go back to, is he done?
No, he's not done, because these two young men said that they're his cousins. That's what they said in their reports. He says that he has no cousins with that last name. That's fine. I only said that they said that they're his cousins. And again, you can go look for yourself, but he won't go look for it at all. He will not. And he will never hold Thomas Duffy ever accountable, because he's scared of him. Even though he's the champ, he won't hold a dude who assaults young men in the city of Worcester openly and publicly without fear of reprisal from any public leader in this city. You will not do anything to stop Thomas Duffy and his reign of fear. Officers are afraid of that man, and you won't stand up to him. You'll call other people names, and you'll let other people run down young girls' names online, but you will not stand up against a person who beats up children and gets away with it because he's wearing a badge. Yeah. And because I got hot, Leanne brought me a snack.
I want to go back to the hours worked from last week.
Look at Leanne brought me this, guys. Everybody, Leanne's office is next door. She came in and brought it. Feastables. I don't know what it says. Mr. Feast.
I found it interesting that one of the union leaders said about that it has nothing to do with civil rights, so the Civil Rights Commission shouldn't be looking into this. Well, there's nobody else to look into it. That's the problem. But secondly, I framed it as soon as you put on a Worcester Police Department badge, you become RoboCop, apparently, and you're impervious to fatigue. We talked about this last week. I would just say this. And I thought about this during the week. I don't want to deal with that anymore. I'll just say this. Let's look at traffic accidents involving Worcester police cruisers and correlate that to the numbers of hours worked that week. And let's put out a report on that. Let's do it.
I'm down.
We'll never get that report ever in a million years.
Because, like this situation over here, Tom, we have complaints and issues where they've gone to the Bureau of Professional Standards. And what happens with those complaints, Tom?
Nothing.
Even though we have a policy to investigate those complaints all the way to the ends of the earth.
Yep. So look, I do think it will probably be better under this chief, but or we could just do something that would give the public some sort of confidence that at least when there's complaints or when there's issues, when there's cases internally, that the determination of the facts is fair and based on evidence. That's it. But this city council is not going to do that, and we'll fight till the end of the earth to prevent it.
They will. They will not look into this, just like our candidates and leaders that are there that accept this status quo will never do the work that's necessary to actually look into corruption and dishonesty and lying. You won't do it. You'll pontificate about platitudes and kind of amorphous things that don't ever talk about anything, and will attack other people, but we will never go after the leaders who have delivered it. If the city council, Tom, if the city council is dysfunctional, which we all seem to agree about, we agree that it's dysfunctional, who's the leader? Who's leading the city council currently? Does anybody know? Because it's Mayor Joseph Petty. So he has led the dysfunction. It is what it is. I've said that to his face. You are in charge, and you're allowing this to happen. So this thing with the complaint against the education committee, right? Mayor Petty is openly and clearly organizing the majority to try to punish Councilor King, because Councilor King's running for mayor. That's what's happening. Everybody who is a grown-up knows that that's what's happening. And I'm willing to say it. Tom, and I'm not asking you to agree with me, Tom. I'm just saying that I think you would be willing to say it too. And that is what we're asking for in our candidates, and we're asking for that in our city leaders, for you to be willing to speak to what is exactly happening right in front of your eyes. Just say it. This is what is happening. We're watching people literally to our faces commit open acts of political corruption on top of crime. Literally happening here in the city of Worcester. And again, I've said these things a lot. You know, Mr. Cipro answered a comment of mine, and he said it's close to defamation. You ever wonder, Tom, why I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years? How come they haven't sued me yet? How come no one sued me for defamation yet?
Well, I mean, in their defense, you don't have any money.
You're right. No, but I'm just saying, you think they would sue me to silence me, right? Or like get an injunction against me or anything. But there's a key component why they don't sue me, Tom, because then I get discovery. And if I got discovery, then we would be able to say that not only am I saying the truth based on the evidence that's available, but there's even more evidence behind closed doors that I would then have access to. But they won't. They won't allow you access to the truth. So even me, who normally I'm just a fringe journalist, right? Not important at all in the grand scheme of things in the world. Maybe I do a couple things here in the city of Worcester who, that help people or whatever, that's fine. But, and that help me and I work with you, Tom. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm aware of my position. If I died tomorrow, it wouldn't matter at all, right? I could be replaced very easily, and that's okay. That doesn't mean anything. But the point is that even me, they're not coming after me because there's something to what I'm saying. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And again, we deliver the news here at This Week in Worcester, and even and same with Manny J Media. We deliver the news that's the truth. Repeatedly and repeatedly, we try to bring the truth and bring the evidence, regardless of where it brings us. Right? Because sometimes it doesn't bring us to the conclusion that the person we don't like is the person that's doing the bad thing, right, Tom? Sometimes we found out it's a person we really like. And it turns out they're the scumbag, right? And then you're like, oh man, that really stinks because I like that guy, and we don't want that or like that girl or whatever. But in the end,
and I try to keep separation between
yeah.
I think I like people that I think have abhorrent politics, right? I do. I like plenty of people that I think have horrible politics. But they're good people, right? So, on the easy, for whatever reason, people have different reasons to like people. But I mean, there's also, especially, city council. Those that I've gotten to know, I like very much, and some of them I have, almost entirely different politics. We are different on almost every issue. So, I try to separate that. I try to separate the two because having abhorrent beliefs doesn't, what I think are abhorrent beliefs politically, doesn't necessarily mean that the actual person is the bad person.
Right. They could just hold a position that you just don't agree with, and that's completely okay. That's completely okay.
Right. So 2 hours in, this is a good yelling session. Wait till you see Tuesday. I hope people will come. I'll just end this topic with this. I hope people come. If you don't want to speak, don't. If you want to speak, speak. But I hope people will come because you feel an obligation to defend your neighbors because this city council, the majority of it at least, certainly will not.
Yeah, so just come out to Tuesday. Stand your ground, whatever position you have. To be honest with you, Tom, I hope there's opposition to this opinion, and I hope people come. But just be prepared to deal with the facts, right? And I want to point out real quickly, every case that Tom and I have discussed tonight existed independent of the Department of Justice report. So these were all cases that were in the public eye, that were litigated in public, that were documented, were reported on before the announcement of the Department of Justice investigation, and have been parallel to it. They just happen to be covered in that investigation, random selection, whatever. Maybe that's not true. Maybe they didn't do it randomly. Maybe they picked those cases on purpose. I don't know. I'm willing to criticize them as well. And to be honest with you, there's two guys that I've known for a long time, and you can look their names up. It's not that hard to find out. Two lawyers who were Trump-appointed attorneys who began this investigation under President Trump #1, and were the only two retained Republican staffers that were on the Department of Justice case. They have, in many, many cases, given me information, not Tom. They've given information to me. They remain in the building despite Joe Biden being president. They remain the entirety of the 4 years that Joe Biden was president. And I will take you to the next level. The 3 Democratic staffers that are on this thing are still there. They were not let go. The 5 attorneys that were on this case, that have been on this case this entire time, are still there. Imagine that, Tom. They're still there in an environment where we have all this stuff happening and all these things that are going on. Donald Trump has retained 3 Democrats to stay in Worcester and investigate this case. Is that nonsensical or what? Right? So that's the facts of the case. The facts of the case. That's not a thing. Did they get rid of the person who was in charge, Josh Levy? Yes. And
of course. That's always. That always happens.
But the head person always gets taken out no matter who's the president, right? But the staffers on this investigation have remained in place and are currently negotiating with the city. That is a fact. They still have retained outside counsel. Why is that happening, folks, if what we're saying is bullshit? Come on.
Well, I mean, look, the facts are that, despite their public position, that the unions are also meeting with the DOJ. So that's a fact.
Yeah, that's an absolute fact. And so now, of course, they would never admit that in public, though, Tom. And then if you bring that up, though, now what are you doing? You're creating division and da-da-da. Of course we have to be there because we need to see what's happening. No, you don't. If you don't believe there's any validity to it, why would you be there?
Yeah. It's
Here's the best part about that. They were invited to this negotiation.
Yep.
They don't have to be there, but the Department of Justice invited them, which is a public statement that was made at the December 18th, also not a riot, December 18th public event at the YWCA, right? They made that statement then. We heard that in public. They said, we extend the offer to the unions to come and see the process as we're working it through with the city. We are completely transparent. That was the statement of the Department of Justice attorney at the time, who happened to be a Democrat, a Democratic appointee. I don't know her personal political affiliations, but she was appointed by Joe Biden, and said that that's the process they were going to do. And it turns out that it's true. Sean Murtha, who is the spokesperson for the chief of police, and I think there's now a second person that does other public announcements, right? So, but Sean Murtha, generally the person you need to go through to talk to the chief of police, has in his last statement publicly, which was the week before the chief's announcement, said that they are still in ongoing negotiations, and the chief has been attending those meetings. So we know that this is an ongoing thing. It's not, no one's hiding it. It's openly being dealt with. And this report on Tuesday is supposed to be the answer that's going to propel them forward to finalizing whatever agreement they come to with the Department of Justice, which I think, Tom, for the city of Worcester, if they announce a month from now or 2 months from now that they've come to an agreement with the Department of Justice under President Trump, and they have agreed upon this thing, one, it does two things. It is great for the city that they came to an agreement. And two, it also validates all of the folks that have been saying there's something to this. It creates a wonderful potential scenario of actual reform. And I hope that that's what the city ends up doing. I really, truly do. But like you, I wonder if that is not their plan to pull out or not, not agree with it. But it would be great for the city to validate what we were saying as being true. Not everything. Of course, we know there's some bullshit in there. That's how it is in every situation. But that the vast majority of what was said was true.
And the thing is, nobody's going to go to jail because that's so, like, it's a little different when you try to send somebody to prison for a thing they didn't do, and when a report that doesn't name names comes out that says you have some problems. It's not the same. So anyway,
but hey, Tom, real quick, Mr. Beast, if he wants to, can totally sponsor the This Week in Worcester podcast for these chocolate things. Yeah.
John, let's go to your favorite part of the show.
Go in the comments and tag Mr. Beast right now. Yeah, tag him. Get in there. YouTube, X, Facebook, wherever else Tom is broadcasting this thing. Get on there and say to Mr. Beast that there's a new show he should be sponsoring right now. And that's the hard-hitting journalism of the This Week in Worcester podcast.
Your favorite part of the show. Go.
It's not my favorite part of the show, Tom. That is a lie. Tom Marino. The fact is that this is voted by our watchers. The thousands of people who tune in to the Tom and John show week after week after week and engage with us. They have said that their favorite part of the show is Tom's favorite things. That's right. Tom's favorite things. Everybody who's watching in the chat right now, what I do each week is I ask a question of Mr. Tom Marino, editor of This Week in Worcester. I ask him about his favorite things. And we've covered it all. We've covered candy. And maybe Mr. Beast would now be like on that, high up on that list. We've covered pizza, right? And then big time controversy, because we all know that I Love Frankie's is not the best pizza in the city of Worcester, although Tom doesn't agree. He has his own choices. Right. We've talked about music. We've talked about movies. We've talked about wrestling. We've talked about baseball. We've talked about all the stuff on a regular basis. Tom, you know what I've never asked you about? And it's crazy because I love coffee, but I have never asked you, Tom Marino, what is your favorite hot drink?
Hot drink. Like not necessarily from Starbucks, but you know how they do like that take on the caramel macchiato? It's like they turned the caramel macchiato into a drink. Other places like independent, I try to go to real coffee shops and not garbage. I mean, it's not like I'm opposed to getting a Dunkin's once in a while, but I mean that's like should be nobody's first choice. But like something like that, little caramel, maybe, or a little chocolate in something with espresso. But like espresso. If I'm going to I'm going to pay $100 for a coffee or whatever it is now. I want espresso. I don't want coffee, or at least some espresso.
Something that's going to punch you in the face is what you're asking for?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm like practically impervious to caffeine. It does very little to me.
So my favorite hot drink, and I haven't had it in a little while, and I should probably have it. And actually, I went with Leanne. Was it yesterday? I think we went to Stop Cafe on Park Avenue, and they have Turkish coffee there, and they serve it in this little gold cup, and it is like espresso times 1,000.
Yeah, it's like fuel. It's like gasoline.
It is absolute rocket fuel. Sometimes I remember one time I drank it at like 6 o'clock at night, and I couldn't sleep.
No.
Like stayed up until the next day, and then stayed up like through the next night of the second day, and like was like my brain was cooking because I drank it all at once. I like hammered the thing. I was like, oh yeah, this is only a little cup. I'm just gonna go bang, and oh no, you gotta sip it and savor the deliciousness that is Turkish espresso over at Stop Cafe. And I you know what thing I do? And then there's another place that we went there. We went with Manny and C and Maria, and we've gone there a bunch of times now. Meraki on Shrewsbury Street. Have you been to Meraki yet? It's like a little Greek Albanian place.
I have not.
Another cool place. They do some coffee, but they have this Cookie Monster coffee that you should go try. Really, really, really good. And it's not too expensive. Oh, look at Maria says it right in the chat. Look at right there, Cookie Monster. It was really, really good. And then there's another place, and then Bean Counter, which there's 2 locations, I think now. Some nice coffee. And Baylan's Casa de Pan on Main Street, another place with some really good coffee. Gets some of that El Salvadorian stuff going over there. So why is there no night coffee places though? Does anybody want to know? Answer that question.
Night anything anymore.
Oh man, but see the thing with the night coffee places, you don't need a liquor license. You can just have coffee. You can be open you can stay open all night. You know what I mean?
I mean, and what is open 24 hours in the city anymore? Nothing.
Yeah, well,
convenience stores.
Yeah, just like CVS, and I don't think Walgreens is open 24 hours anymore. I think just CVS is, and then Kenmore Diner though is still open overnight, late at night, under the bridge there.
Yeah.
I think they're still open like late, and I don't know who else. I don't know if there's anybody else, but there should be like just place that opens at 10 at midnight, 10 p.m.
Like I mean, no slight to the owners of the Boulevard. I'm sure they're doing like what makes business sense, but that place not being open 24 hours a day is a sin.
Well, the Boulevard is great too. Another great breakfast place. I know everybody likes Miss Worcester, but I feel, I think there's a lot of great breakfast places in the city that just kind of.
I mean, Miss Worcester though. I mean, some of them French toast.
High quality. And you know who has a great cup of coffee and then nobody knows about this, and I swear it's because they have one of the oldest coffee makers in the city is the Boynton. The Boynton has an amazing cup of coffee, but it's because it's like years of caked in coffeeness is just sitting in that pot. And the owners of the Boynton are going to get mad at me. But I love their coffee. I absolutely love it. I'm one of the few people who asks for coffee at the Boynton. It's John, and every time I go there, I get it because I love it. I get it absolutely black and just drink it right to my face, and oh man, it's good. So,
Fiona with a good point. Insomnia is open late.
Insomnia Cookies. Hey, so everybody, by the way, go to all these places. Make sure you go to Stop Cafe, the Bean Counter, the Boynton, Kenmore Diner, the Boulevard, Insomnia Cookies, and say that This Week in Worcester podcast sent you, right? And make sure we get some credit for this so we can get a bunch of sponsors. You know what I mean? Because Big Daddy John and Big Daddy Tom want to get some pay in here.
Just don't do that all in one day, or you will almost certainly die.
By the way, I don't know if Jose's still here, but if I was gonna be a boxer, my boxing name would be Big Daddy John.
Good God. All right. So that is how we'll somehow close this big yell fest today. We will be back on a week from today. We do this every Sunday at 8:35 or so. We start. We will do our best to try to screw it up less next week. Until then, thank you everybody for participating and listening and watching This Week in Worcester.
Fred Nathan.